put it all together.
Okay.
Well, not yet. The profit margins just seem incredible. I mean, I obviously have to leave out. They work. Well, not. I paid an actual 4 cents all in. That will not be
I'm just going to be here so I can.
Cool.
5 cents. I have a secondary facility in the local silicon shop. They're all arguing.
Okay, I'm going to put that right there. Don't knock it.
All right. Okay, we're going to start the second Portland Ethereum presentation night. We have Doug King here with us, and he's going to talk about blockchain-based reputation systems.
Yeah! All right. My name is Doug King. I'm currently working on building a specification for a general-purpose reputation system that runs on Ethereum or some other blockchain-based contractual system. So, reputation systems are something we're all familiar with. Currently, reputation systems that we're familiar with look like eBay. I've got to get my slides going here. Hang on a sec. All right. We're frozen. All right. We lost our second screen. Okay, how do I switch to 2 screens here?
Can you just, is your cursor just travel over, or are you trying to do that?
Oh, okay. Huh.
I'm trying to, you can't advance, is that what's up?
Yeah.
Right. Try that. There you go.
There we go. Okay. I'm not seeing my slides, though. I'm just seeing my notes.
All right, one moment, guys. Technical difficulties. All right, now seeing your slides, just seeing your notes.
There we go.
Okay, is that working? Can you advance?
Yep.
All right.
Okay. So reputation systems are pretty ubiquitous now in the sharing economy and anywhere community is part of a platform or really the core value of a platform. Digital reputation systems are not really well understood as a general concept, but they're used currently to further the aims of a specific platform or software offering. So this is the first iteration of reputation systems that we're all familiar with, is just essentially a star rating. Current systems are a little more complex than that. So we're familiar with eBay. We've got multiple ratings for several different values in the community. The item as described: communication, shipping time, and shipping charges. This is a little bit better than just a 1-star rating. You may have textual reviews with that. You may see things like Web of Trust. Typical platforms are Uber, Airbnb, Stack Overflow, Reddit, those kind of things. So in Reddit, if you upvote, downvote, you get karma. It's a very simple system, but it keeps spammers from posting spam posts. You could say many of these platforms would be crippled, or they wouldn't even exist if there weren't for a reputation system in there somewhere. So current deficiencies of these systems are pretty serious, and they're about to get disrupted by blockchain-based reputation systems. Current systems lock you in. The reputation is owned and maintained by the platform, and essentially lock-in is the goal. They have no incentive to allow you to take your reputation elsewhere or in any way manage your own reputation or identity. There's no standards, reputation is not portable, and it's really in the best interest of the platforms to own your reputation data. So what we really need is a reputation or a relationship economy. In this new world, who you trust and who trusts you will really be your primary asset. You'll be able to choose the product or vote for a candidate or find people that you can do business with in your communities based on trust and recommendations from other community members. So we can do a lot better than current systems. Using programmable blockchain where contracts and code are first-class citizens, we can create reputation systems that will enable communities of interest to form around shared values. Communities guided by contracts and reputation will allow for self-organizing systems to emerge that are aligned around the set of community values. Holders of reputation will be able to aggregate and expose outside of their communities as much or as little of their reputation and identity as they wish, and extract value from it and use it to enable new ways of lending, insuring, creating and selling content, and earning dividends in DAO type of economies that they belong to. So we're just starting to figure out blockchain, DAOs, smart contracts, game theory, token economy, and adding reputation, trust, identity, and attention economy to the mix is like juggling chainsaws. These are all new concepts that need to be fleshed out and tried out, and they're not easy to design or describe, but we're going to take a stab at it in maybe small steps. Other people are trying to design entire reputation systems from scratch, and I'll give you examples of some of those as we go along here. So what are the components of reputation, and how can we use blockchain to our advantage? Reputations are built on identity, repeated games, histories of the outcome, and context of the community values. Identity is fundamental to reputation, but it's not your reputation. Identities can be created for a specific community, or they can be an aggregate identity that combines identities from other platforms. As long as that identity is available to the blockchain, you should be able to use that as your identity, or you can create one on a community that has a contract on the blockchain. But they need to be globally unique and accessible by contracts on the blockchain. So repeated games consist of players, agents. They could be software agents or human agents, or a combination of that, and rules, which are embedded into contracts, and the game outcomes of the rules. So repeated games are essentially the rules in a community that are played out over and over again. An example of eBay, once again, you would have a repeated game which is called shipping. So there's specific rules to the shipping game and specific outcomes, and in combination, multiple games create an economy and a community. So in order to record reputation, you need a history. The blockchain is very good at that. Depending on how you want to expose that history, you're going to end up with a different view on somebody's reputation. in general, a sliding window might be a good idea. You don't want to have reputation that is not current. There's a number of different ways to create algorithms for extracting reputation out of the history, but the rules of the DAO or the community would specify how reputation was extracted from that history. And none of this has any meaning other than the meaning created by the community. The context of the community really defines the reputation and the values of that community. So in order to create the values of a community, you're going to have rules about what specific pieces of reputation mean. And that's the vocabulary of the community. It can be represented as the values of individual transactions. So you can't really create a reputation system that is similar to a monetary system in that reputation is tradable. We've seen some reputation systems that attempt to allow people to trade on their reputation or use reputation that they gain to upvote or downvote other people. So in other words, there's some sort of economic value to the reputation itself. That's not a good idea. It kind of undermines community, and it can be gamed pretty easily. So you almost need a two-tier system of reputation tokens and value system, and then you need another token or value system underneath that you can monetize based on reputation. So you shouldn't be able to trade reputation, but you can leverage reputation to create value in your transactions. So that would be a way to convert reputation into something more fungible. So how would we build a simple marketplace on top of a blockchain like Ethereum? In the case of, once again, eBay or a marketplace running on Ethereum, we would have contracts that define the rules for offering, bidding, shipping, and payment. And each of these contracts would be an example of a repeated game where players would cooperate to some degree or defect. For example, offering contract would define rules for product listing. The offering contract would have outcomes that evaluate to how satisfied a customer was and how well the seller described the condition. The other contracts like bidding, shipping, and payment could be structured similarly. Programmable blockchains solve a lot of these problems because they have general purpose mechanisms for defining contracts and recording history. So how do we build a reputation system without repeating the problems of existing platforms like lock-in and proprietary algorithms? We can use existing systems to leverage identity. This is one name. This is identity system. So we don't need to build our identity systems into a reputation system. We can use external identity systems. So with Ethereum as a blockchain, we can use the contract system for creating tokens that represent reputation value, and we can create community tags and community value system that's represented with RDF-like triples that define values and the meaning of those values. So with the history stored on the blockchain, it's distributed and immutable, and you can use blockchain analytics to extract meaning from that. Scores can be defined by community contracts and they'll exist within the community, but outside of the community, analytic engines can read the transactions on the blockchain to come up with their own analysis of reputation, similar to how PageRank works or other reputation systems extract meaning. So the current blockchain efforts at reputation systems are underway. There's a number of reputation systems being developed: Colony, Backfeed, Fabrique. There's a number of others. They all have similar flaws to existing platforms in that they are still silos where reputation cannot be extracted out of the system. Some of these systems are part of larger platforms like Augur and Colony, which is designed as a specific work, a community designed to do piecemeal work. Some are general purpose builders, community builders, such as Backfeed and Fabrique, but none are really general purpose reputation protocols. I think Backfeed probably comes closest to a general purpose system. I'll describe that a little bit. In Backfeed, a reputation score is not transferable, and it's a unit of measure that reflects the degree of alignment of somebody inside that community or network. It reflects the degree of alignment they are with their peers. And the reputation score in Backfeed determines how much influence each user has in the evaluation process of the contributions of other participants. So if you have higher reputation, you have more influence in evaluating other participants, and therefore reputation can be accumulated in two different ways. One is by making a contribution to the network that's perceived as valuable and being rated for it, and the other is making a useful evaluation of someone else's contribution. So in Backfeed, it's important that you rate the raters, and this keeps the community in alignment with its core values. So transferring value, transferable value in Backfeed is distributed as tokens, which are issued automatically whenever a contribution is recognized as valuable by the majority of reputation in the network. So if the majority of reputation in the network defines something as valuable and a contribution is made, then tokens are issued. Whenever an action is performed that requires the attention or evaluation of other users, a fee will be paid for that attention or evaluation. So in this way, tokens can represent the equity of a company or a DAO, and it can be used to create an internal market that successfully evaluates the product, and it creates tangible external market value as the DAO token value increases. So as you build your reputation in a community such as Backfeed, you have more power in creating value in the network, and that value is transferred to you as tokens in the DAO. So one of the important things about Backfeed is that you can fork the entire community. So if, just like an open source project, if there are members that feel that they can do a better job at whatever it is the community is doing, they're allowed to take the entire community and fork it and continue on. They'll maintain their reputation in that community. The rules of that community will come over, and then they'll be able to modify it. So in this way, forking a community allows the community to grow and split if the values aren't in alignment with some members. It's very similar to open source software, and it's something that allows communities to split and potentially still interoperate with each other. So it's a mechanism for making sure that communities don't turn it into echo chamber. So this kind of allows for a loosely aligned interest to form between fork communities, and it's an optimization. So in a reputation system, the community values really determine the context of the reputation. And in order to create that context, community members should be allowed to create the tags that represent those values as part of their everyday interaction with that community or doing their work in that community. If a tag doesn't exist that represents the value that they need or they think they need, they should be able to create one. However, it wouldn't have as much weight if it wasn't used as much. So tagging of values would be weighted so that the most used values of the community would be at the top of the list and would carry the most weight and reputation. So in that way, community values are represented algorithmically, and community members are allowed to create and move the community values based on how much reputation they have and how much weight a tag carries. So this is roughly a rough overview of building a reputation system that allows communities to define the values, that runs on the blockchain. It runs as a smart contract. Blockchain keeps a record. Analytics can be done outside of the community or inside of the community. Reputation can be owned by individual members and taken with them if they fork a community. What I'd like to see is people working on reputation systems to come together to define a core specification for the simplest subset of defining a community, defining a community value tagging system, defining the network graph, and defining the identity system that goes with that. And if we have a simple spec that encompasses all those things, I think people building reputation systems can build something that's interoperable. So I'm working on a minimum spec, and it uses JSON LD as the backing store of data. JSON LD stands for linked data, and it allows for building network graphs, and it's being used by a number of people that are building reputation systems already. So I'd be interested in speaking with anybody that is doing the same thing and would like to work on an open spec for reputation systems. The last mile of a reputation system, I mean, you could create a spec, you could create a contract, you could create all this wonderful code, but you really need people to be able to visualize and use a system in a seamless way so that it's just part of their everyday interoperation with the community that they're in, and they generate reputation as they're using it. So I think visualizing reputation and creating it in the UI in a meaningful way is one of the fundamental things that needs to be done after a specification is created. So I'll be happy to take any questions and discussions around reputation systems.
So you mentioned earlier when you have an economy around reputation, when you have fungibility reputation, there are ways you can game that. What are some of the ways that you found that kind of reputation can be gamed?
Well, if reputation is transferable, the simplest way would be to create, a number of accounts and transfer reputation back and forth among friends or sock puppet accounts, basically a Sybil attack. And even a system that tries not to make reputation directly fungible, but it still is leaking fungibility somehow so that that reputation can be traded or moved around in some way, is going to fail for that reason. Eventually somebody will figure out how to game it.
Doug, does this work? Doug, it seems to me when I looked at that visual that it would make a lot of sense to sort of scrape existing reputations, aggregate them, weight them somehow with a permission-based model. People could game it, but at the same time, if you reveal your eBay reputation or your LinkedIn reputation or your Facebook reputation, maybe you could choose that, but the person would know what you're revealing, and then they would have a certain amount of trust, especially when they aggregated it. And I'm just looking at it thinking, I'm thinking about, I don't know, was it Elon Musk that said, either we're going to own our data or they will? And it just really seems, I'm finally getting that how important it is, a system that we could basically own ourselves, our own data. So I'm just wondering if you thought about scraping or aggregating at least to start other existing
from existing systems.
Yeah.
You could do that. There's the one name ID is not really a reputation system, but it allows you to aggregate your identities. So you can say I own this web page, and by sending a token to it, you can identify the fact that you do own it, and you can aggregate identity that way. But aggregating reputation is hard to do because it's created inside of a community. So in the case of eBay or Uber, there's a certain context that was created in, and if you don't understand what the context is, or you can't somehow represent that, then you can't really take that outside of the community and display it. So we're used to credit scores, and because we all understand what the three big rating agencies do to some extent. So they have an algorithm, but essentially it's a simple credit score, and we all have a rough understanding of what that means. You paid your stuff on time. So, but if you get into another community where the value system is different and it's more complex, you're not going to understand that outside of the community unless there's a way to take that information, that value system out of the community and display it or do some sort of analytics to make it available to other people. And if that was the case, and that I think that should be the case, individuals can choose to decide to expose that to the outside world or not, under whatever identity that they created it in. So if they had an anonymous identity that they created some reputation in some sort of marketplace, and they wanted to someday expose that because it was valuable, they should be able to take the context of that community, the value system, and the reputation score and offer that up. They should be able to own that. Now, it's no good outside of the community it was created in, other than as a score that represents how that was created in the community.
So, in storing the statistics for reputation, that comes at a cost. Who do you envision being responsible for the cost of storing that information?
So if it depends on how much information is there. I mean, you could store it on blockchain, but I understand what you're saying, especially the entire graph. If reputation is based on others' reputation, and that goes several levels deep, the most likely scenario was you would use something like IPFS. So if you had a graph or a lot of data, you'd store it on IPFS as a hash, and then that hash would be stored on the blockchain that your community lives on.
Hearing that answer and understanding what he's asking, to me it seems like there's two problems with this particular model, which is when you say IPFS, that inherently would assume that there's some sort of file system that's currently available for free, fits your spec, and therefore can be ported from one to another ad infinitum, meaning there will always be some alternative to where you are currently. Potentially so, right? Maybe in the grand scheme of in the grand scheme of internet.
There's other things like IPFS, yeah.
However, I guess the bigger question to that would be is who would benefit from this the most? Should they then have to pay some fee like we have current models? And if not, how many levels of editorial need to exist to make proper filter? Let's say, for example, trust was based on product performance and you have a scuba regulator, and you say only people that really understand scuba diving would truly understand what a computerized regulator does versus an analog regulator, similar to any kind of data set. How do you score the reviews of a public that may or may not be qualified to give that review?
So there's two ways to look at it, and the first one is inside the community that was created in. So let's say it was created inside a scuba diving community and it had particular rules, or it was somebody that was manufacturing open source scuba equipment or something. They had values in that community and rules of how they evaluated the members in that community, and that would be obvious and clear inside of that community. But as soon as you want to export that out, you're going to have to either take that value system out, or if you're going to do analytics on it, it would be up to third parties to do analytics and figure that out. They'd be able to see the chain of reputation. They'd have to run some algorithm on it. So in other words, there's third parties out there that offer up analytics for the stock traders on Twitter sentiment analysis, right? So who pays for that? So the stock trader is going to pay for the company that does the analytics on top of the Twitter graph, and they're going to do sentiment analysis on that, and somebody's going to pay for it. So there'll potentially be marketplace for analytics on top of the history of the blockchain or the history of these communities if they're exposed. So inside of the communities, it's going to be part of the community system that if there's an economy and there's a cost to it, there's going to be a cost to running these on the blockchain, there's going to be a cost to running these platforms. The cost is going to be borne by the members of the community that are getting value out of that community. Outside of that, if they want to expose that, then analytics could be done by third parties on top of that. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? I think the model is similar to sentiment analysis of tweets for stock traders or any other, open social graph where you want to extract some information out of it.
So basically, it's always going to be the end beneficiary that funds the effort.
Somebody who's getting the value out of it is going to fund it, yeah. And in the case of a blockchain community that's running as a DAO or some sort of enterprise, there's going to be, maybe the DAO is going to decide how much it costs to create an account in that community. The other model would be, and this is an interesting model too, the other model would be to create your own reputation platform. So let's call it Karma Koin or something like that. And so you would create Karma Koin with the intention that someday Karma Koin itself was fungible and would have a lot of value. Karma Koin would run the reputation system. It would be the unit of transfer of work or value. You couldn't create a Karma Koin community without buying Karma Koin, right? You take the Karma Koin, you pay for some of it, and now you're allowed to start a community, and you kind of fund it with Karma Koin, and the members that join that community, you're going to have to pay somehow to cover the cost of that Karma Koin. Or maybe you're an enterprise and you're going to cover the cost of that Karma Koin, and your members, or somehow you're extracting value out of your members inside of that community. But that's one model. You could create a commercial enterprise that runs a typical, blockchain token coin that builds general purpose reputation system, but you got to use the Karma coin to do it. And then whoever was doing that would have to come up with an economic model that funded their enterprise and that allowed them to, you'd trade Karma coin on some sort of exchange and the value of it would go up if there was value in that system, if it was a really good system and everybody could use it and they extracted value out of it. They'd want more Karma coin if there was a limited supply of it. You'd have to go on an exchange and the price would go up as there were more. So that's one way of covering the cost. Now that's not, I suppose you could use an open system for that. You could create an open system and allow anybody to create any kind of reputation altcoin they wanted to use this open system. That's one model. And I suspect there's a couple of companies out there that are looking at it that way.
Only those who want
Only those that would want an unmoderated feed of consumer feedback at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Doug, it also seems to me that in real life, your reputation costs you money. When you talk about the credit score, if I want to own my reputation or own my data, and I want to release it selectively, there's times I might want to release it for a mortgage or auto loan or something that might save me money. So it might be worth a small fee for me, to maintain it and hold it if the market's going to respond to it when I release it by giving me better offers or lower rates.
Right.
It's a different way that I might actually, I don't think it would be that expensive on a yearly basis for individually. I just was thinking how, WhatsApp was free for the first year, then it was $1, and they didn't have a lot of trouble getting people to pay that. I know it was such a, high demand service, and it was third world countries, so there weren't reliable alternatives. But I just think, stealing your identity and your credit scores, all that is very expensive in the financial services industry. So there, I don't necessarily want to have somebody. I don't want to own my data, put it on a reputation system, and then have people, evaluating it and sending me offers unless I opt in. But maybe it's a freemium service that is what happens unless you pay your $1 or your quarter or whatever.
Exactly.
And then you're outside of their system.
Yeah. So your reputation is valuable. If you build your reputation up, let's say you're really good at researching certain types of science articles, and you're in this community of people that are experts in that field. And inside of this community, you're generating reputation as experts in this field, and that reputation can be used to filter information also, because all these interactions that you've made inside that community have, remember the repeated game, that you've got the game and the outcome. So let's say you rated a science article and you created some sort of abstract about it, and you're rated very highly in your community for that. So now there's a record of all that, and you also have a high reputation. So you should be able to sell that. Essentially, what you've done is you've become a filter for, a high-value filter for this type of information. All that stuff is stored on the blockchain, what you rated, and how other people in your community rated you about your knowledge about those science articles and the ability to create abstracts. So now you have a really high reputation. It's just like a high reputation blogger. Advertisers want to go to them and pay them a lot of money to stick their stuff on their feed. So once you've got a reputation and it's tied to something that can be parsed and used, you've now created a lot of value in your reputation that can be used, can be reused by other people. So that applies to a lot of different areas. That was just one example.
And that just goes back to, it seems like if you were scraping the top X amount of reputation systems and aggregating it, even without permission, that would be valuable data. And then almost like a fee to opt out, to own it, might be an interesting. It might actually work, I think, in this system because it's so personal. But anyway.
Yeah, my point of view is that the person that garners the reputation that creates it inside of a community has something of value there, and that you should be able to trade on that. So there's ways to extract that, and my example is like a well-known blogger that blogs on certain things. There's other examples of reputation out there that you can look at and say, well, if this person has a high reputation and they have a record of all this information that was used to create this reputation, and that information is valuable in some way, they should own that and they should be able to sell it or dictate the terms of its use. And that's what the blockchain is really good at. It's good at tracking those transactions and that value.
In an abstract, that almost lends itself to a scary thought that almost all interactions, therefore, should have metrics that are recorded and judged. I was thinking about a potential application, for example, an HOA, a neighborhood where you say, kind of, in an SS Stasi way, you have people that are turning you in for crimes against the community. However, if it's recorded fairly and it's based on some sort of logic, which is, if you didn't put your recycle bin in, for 3 days, you're kind of a nuisance on the sidewalk. If you don't clean up, that's an application idea maybe for where I could see with these trust systems working, where you have an incentive to maybe pay in, otherwise be fined, or maybe get discounts on good behavior. But it's interesting that it almost fosters itself to the notion that you always should be judged and that there is no anonymous transaction, whether it's benign or malignant.
There's dystopian futures that you can easily envision, and I think just like social networks where we learned fairly quickly how to manage your identity and how to manage your social network and what to expose and what not to expose, we're going to find the same things out. But you can't do that if you don't have the tools. So if Facebook or social networks don't allow you to do those things, they're going to fail, or you're going to end up with some sort of dystopia. I think the marketplace will figure out how to allow individuals to control and expose how much of the reputation they want. And inside of communities, that's the community business. It just goes back billions of years or however long we've been here. If you live on an island, my sister lives on Orcas Island. It's a pretty big island, but everybody that's been there for a long time, they know each other. And same with a small town, your reputation is really, really important. But at the same time, what other people say about you and rumors and so on can be really damaging. So there's a lot of analogs to how things already work. We're kind of used to being in big cities and being able to be anonymous. And you should be able to be anonymous, but you should also be able to expose yourself. And these things should work the same way. There's dangers on both sides.
Any more questions? All right. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks. John, you're next.
Do you currently work with trust rating systems?